Hi there, welcome to another edition of Resistance TV. Now then, the political class are becoming increasingly authoritarian, and that's, as I'm sure many of our viewers will have seen, been manifesting itself with the police clamping down on solidarity, in particular with Palestine. So I'm going to start tonight's show by reciting Pastor Martin Niemöller's poem, First They Came. And again, I guess many of our viewers will be aware of Pastor Niemöller, who was a victim of the Nazis, and I guess you're probably familiar with the poem as well too. So anyway, here goes. This is what it says. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. So the reason I recited that poem is because Communist Party members have been among the first to be targeted by this clampdown, which has been instigated by Zionist extremists and their apologists in Parliament. And around half the Parliamentary Labour Party are members of the so-called Labour Friends of Israel, and it's around 80% of Tory MPs who are in the equivalent Conservative Friends of Israel. So, the Zionists have really cornered the market, as it were, in terms of support in Westminster. Anyway, I'm pleased to welcome onto the show this evening Ranjeet Brar to talk about this. And I guess a lot of people will know about Ranjeet, but Ranjeet is a consultant vascular and endovascular surgeon and a prominent member of the Communist Party. Welcome to the show, Ranjeet. How are you?
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you. And it's great to be with you.
Great. Well, I'm pleased you've been able to join us this evening, because I know you're incredibly busy. But I just want to start, Ranjeet, if it's okay, because, you've been arrested on two separate occasions where you've been involved in the rallies and marches in support of Palestine. And just before we get into the discussion now, we've got a video that was taken by someone of the last time you were arrested, which I think was around 10 days ago. So we'll just play that first, and then we'll get into your reaction, and if you could give us some background about, why you were arrested on those two separate occasions.
Why are you arresting him? 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 Why are you arresting him?
That really fucking hurts, man.
Yes.
I'm in pain. I'm really fucking
He's in pain. Why are you arresting him? Why are you arresting him?
No reason.
Why are you arresting him?
Oh fuck, that really hurts.
He's got two kids with him. He's got two young kids with him.
Ah fuck, please take him off. Ah, in my shoulder.
He's got two kids with him, guys. Why are you arresting him? What are you doing?
This is fascism.
Shame on you.
This is fascism.
Shame on you. What are you doing? He's got two kids out there. What are you doing?
My baby boy's on the street. There's no one
Yeah,
looking after
we'll
me.
sort that. But,
My baby boy's on the street. No one's looking after me. Why are you doing that? Fuck. My baby boy's on the street.
Both of them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My right shoulder. Yes, please take them.
What are you doing? Why are you arresting him? He's got two kids.
My baby boy is on the street. My child is on the street. I don't want him to run into the road. My 4-year-old baby is on the street.
Let's get in this okay?
Bring my baby. Bring my 4-year-old baby.
We'll sort it, Ranjeet. Don't worry.
We'll sort it out. It's my child.
Yeah.
It's my 4-year-old fucking son.
Shame on you guys. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Go home, you ashamed yourselves at night.
What are you doing? Shame on you.
Fascism.
Shame on you.
Absolutely disgraceful.
Shame on
You
you.
are a disgrace to this country.
Shame on you.
The fascists in the Second World War to stop this sort of behaviour. You are an absolute disgrace.
Those images are really shocking, Ranjeet, to watch, let alone be the victim of it. Just tell us about, obviously, that arrest and the previous arrest. And what in God's name is going on? It's kind of, well, it flabbergasted me. I mean, I've seen that video a few times, and it's shocking every time I look at it.
Yeah, I feel a little bit emotional watching it, actually, Chris, remembering it. I actually hadn't seen that particular video and that particular image, but yeah, I was in physical pain. So this is, I was obviously particularly worried, and what really upset me was, I had attended a peaceful vigil, really, outside Hammersmith Police Station. And that's because the day before, that was Sunday, the 14th of January. The day before, Saturday, the 13th of January, there'd been another enormous and impressive demonstration in solidarity with the people of Palestine marching against the genocide in central London. And I'd attended that demonstration despite having previously been arrested on the 25th of November last year. But I was bailed under particular conditions on the 25th of November that they made it illegal for me to distribute books, distribute leaflets, distribute material at a demonstration. They made it illegal on my bail conditions to deviate from the route of march, and they made it illegal for me to, distribute the imagery of the far right, which I hadn't done in any way, but fine. I said, fine. But they made it explicit that I was able to go to demonstrations. And so the day before this particular arrest, I had gone to the Palestine demonstration, as was my right. And I'd spoken, I'd addressed the crowd from a loudspeaker, and got the crowd chanting, got them in conversation, made a few political points, as is my right, exercising my free speech to go to a protest and to exercise my democratic right, apparently, to show solidarity with Palestine. Now, I'd walked away from that demonstration, fine. But then after I'd left, 3 of my comrades from my party, the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, the Communists is our website. You can see details of our information there. They had been arrested, and they had been arrested essentially for giving out a leaflet, and that leaflet expressed solidarity with the Palestinian, and it says, as you see there, victory to the Palestinian people in their just war for liberation. And it particularly says, we take this opportunity, this latest wave in what is a 100-long war, to reaffirm our solidarity with the Palestinian resistance. The Palestinian people, as an occupied people, have the right to resist. That right is enshrined in several UN resolutions. 1960, 1971 are the ones that spring to mind, in which they explicitly say people under occupation have the right to resist. And they particularly make reference to, at that time, the people of apartheid South Africa and the Palestinian people. So there's nothing unusual about that. But the police said that the language of that paragraph was essentially Hamas language. Now, it doesn't mention any particular group. The Palestinians have many different leadership groups, and it's been a feature. If you look at Piers Corbyn, sorry, if you look at Piers, Talk TV, Piers.
Oh, Piers Morgan.
Morgan, of course. Yes, it's a slip of the mind. You look at Piers Morgan and his output. What they're absolutely very keen on doing is getting anyone who's sympathetic towards the Palestinian people onto the show and browbeating them, saying, "Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas?" Now, this is an interesting strategy, because first of all, you'd think it's just a moral condemnation, and everyone says, "Look, I'm against violence. I oppose them." And what they're asking you to do is say that the Palestinian resistance is terrorist. But of course, if you don't do that, if you speak out for the right of the Palestinian people to resist, to exist, and therefore to resist what is a genocide happening against them, well, then they can actually start to put you into a position where they can indict you under the terrorism laws. And so what they did, I hadn't said that, okay? We hadn't discussed explicitly Hamas as an organization, but they say if they can say that you're guilty of supporting Hamas, they can imprison you for up to 14 years under the Terrorism Act 2000, Section 12, which is campaigning or asking for support for a proscribed organization under this law. So it's actually a very draconian and wide-ranging law that they can bring to bear. Now, as it happens, hadn't done any of those things, but that was the grounds on which they arrested my comrades. And on that time, when you're looking at me, I had gone the next day. So this is 1:30, the following day, when I'd gone to the police station to try and get those comrades out, to welcome them out, to encourage the police to release them. They obviously became that I was there, aware that I was there. And what we realize is they're using spotters on the street. So Zionist organizations are using spotters on the street to kind of collaborate with the police to orchestrate these arrests and this criminalization of the campaign. That it become very clear that a website called Harry's Place, that you may be aware of, which is an adjunct essentially of the Zionist movement in Britain and works hand in glove with the British state, had literally taken photos of the comrades who were giving out leaflets, photos of people who were manning the stall, had pinned that on Twitter, atted the Metropolitan Police, given a map where to find them, and orchestrated this campaign. And again, you can see the actual arrest of our comrades. There were literally 50 policemen who came round to arrest them, and they're going through our stall, going through our literature, and confiscating literature and arresting those comrades. Now, all of it, I think, will end up being spurious, and they won't be able to push it through. But this, to me, is acting hand in glove with what has been Suella Braverman and subsequently, David Cameron and Rishi Sunak and others, avowed wish to criminalize the Palestine solidarity movement, to put pressure on the police to say you are given unfair policing, lenient policing, you've got to crack down harder on them. And it's clearly been an orchestrated campaign to do that, of which I feel myself to be really quite an innocent victim, because there's been no sense of fracas, there's been no sense of disorder. Literally, I have expressed solidarity with Palestine on these marches, and I can only assume that our organization's been targeted either for its effectiveness or because it's literally been singled out by the Zionist organizations who work with the police, and they have tried to finger us for arrest.
Yeah. I mean, it's not illegal to support the Palestinian resistance. And as you quite rightly point out, Ranjeet, the Palestinian resistance isn't just Hamas. I mean, you've got the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Islamic Jihad, a range of groups. And there is a combination of the resistance groups who came together on October the 7th. It wasn't just Hamas. I mean, Hamas took the lead. They were the most dominant one. But it's completely wrong to say that it is only Hamas that has been involved in that prison breakout on October the 7th. But just tell us a little bit as well, if you could, Ranji, about the arrest on, I'm not quite sure what the date was, but the first arrest where you had again, that's on video, people might be able to Google it, but you had a long discussion with the police officer, but they still arrested you. And this was because you were selling a particular book, wasn't it?
That's right. And so that was on the, if I'm right, the Saturday, the 25th of November. So we've been to many marches. I've been active on the question of Palestine as you have, Chris, perhaps not as effectively as yourself or as prominently as yourself, but I've been active on the issue as long as I've been interested in politics, as long as I've known about the history. This is not a new conflict. It goes back, as you know, to the Balfour Declaration, to the post-war 1948 Nakba. So it's a long historical conflict. And there's a big historical injustice that has been done towards the Palestinian people. And we've been active campaigners on this. But, we have been in this latest upsurge of the conflict and this huge genocide that has quite rightly outraged a large section of world public opinion, but also the opinion of British working class who have traditionally stood with the Palestinian people. So it's been a huge movement, and I've been at pretty much all of the demonstrations, as I've been to many demonstrations throughout my life. So there's nothing particularly unusual about this event that led to the arrest. We literally, on the 25th of November, had a stall, and we didn't have a huge presence, but we had a stall, one of many organizations to have a stall. But we do have excellent, literature, and I have got this, some of these events recorded. Because what initially happened is we were speaking to some of the policemen. In fact, I recognized some of the policemen from some of the previous demonstrations. And on a previous demonstration, they had taken a pamphlet, which was written actually by my father, Brar, called Zionism. And it's about the history of the ideology of Zionism, where it came from, how it was essentially a British colonial, actually Victorian idea. And it was a construct, which was, they sought to, in their own words, Zionize Judaism and Judaize Zionism. So to take this idea, that the natural homeland of Jews was in Palestine and use it to their own ends. And their own ends were, how to divide and rule the territories that they were planning to newly acquire, and then did newly acquire after the First World War in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. So, if you have a long-term colony, you have to have a long-term strategy to rule. And the British are very good. They had been very good. They had a lot of experience of this. In India, they'd use division between Hindus and Muslims. In the north of Ireland, they'd use divisions between Catholics and Protestants. And their idea in Israel, because they, or rather in their newly conquered territories from what was the Ottoman Empire, was to engender a privileged group, and they planned to use Zionism for that. So there's a whole history of how that was brought about through Lord Salisbury and various other, high-ranking members of the British ruling class. And ultimately, through Theodore Herzl and Leo Pinsker, they were able to bring that to fruition, particularly using Jews from the Jewish population of Eastern Europe and Russia, the former Pale, where they met very heavy discrimination. But it was still a minority view. And so they managed to basically gradually bring this into being. And it talks about the Havara, which is the transfer agreement, which, Ken Livingstone got in trouble for kind of making slightly inaccurate references to it. But this agreement is a historical fact that because Zionism was a far-right ultra-nationalist ideology which considered that the home of the Jews wasn't in Europe and that they could never assimilate, that they should therefore leave, this coincided, it wasn't the same ideology, but it coincided with the belief of far-right Nazism, which also said Jews don't belong in Europe. And obviously, they ultimately went on to perform the Holocaust, which we absolutely don't deny in any way. How could we? It's a historical fact. But that coincidence led to a cooperation, so that the Zionists and the Nazis did cooperate, and they had something called the Havara, which was a transfer agreement, a banking agreement for moving capital and human beings from Germany, from Europe, to Israel. All of this is documented in the book as historical fact. It mainly refers to the work of Jewish scholars, Israeli scholars, and indeed, actually Israeli court cases in which the collaboration with Nazism, was an embarrassment, and ultimately, was the subject of several court cases involving some of the leading, particularly Hungarian Zionists following the war. So all of this is in the book. It's not a new book. It's like a 7. It was published, first of all, 10 years ago in a journal called Lalkar, and then as a collection of articles put together and published 5-6 years ago. The police had previous record of it. And so there's nothing new about it at all. But on this occasion, and again, basically, I think because Harry's Place or another Zionist group had shingered it in the context of Soil of Braveman wanting to crack down and criminalize the demonstrations, having talked to the police initially, they went off, then they came back and said, oh no, we've been told now this is a crime and we have to confiscate the book. So initially they took 20 of the books. They were literally actually taking it out of people's hands because, what we do have at the moment is a mass movement that's hungry for knowledge. Yes. And they're aware of the superficial and open natures of the crimes that's being committed by the state of Israel against the Palestinian people. This is very evident, and I think this, in a sense, the social media generation has kind of blasted a hole in the mainstream media to allow workers of the West to experience that. But what they don't know about is the history. How do we come to that point? And the links, if you like, between Zionism and the masters of Zionism, who are really the Anglo-American, the British and American imperialists who still use Israel as a major plank for domination of the Middle East. So they're hungry. They've got this mass movement that's hungry for knowledge. And I think perhaps for that reason, the Zionists have picked us out as a dangerous group. We're by no means the only place you can get knowledge from, but we do have, and we pride ourselves on excellent analysis and truthful, factual, historical analysis. Your poem that you cite, first they came for the communists, and it really reminds me of Goebbels. You'll probably be aware of Goebbels as the propaganda minister of Germany. He said, he's a person who said, if you tell a big lie often enough, the people will believe it. But what he also said, in the same article, was that the truth is the enemy of the lie. And by extension, the truth is the enemy of the state. Now, of course, that only holds good so long as the state rests upon lies and misinformation. But when the state does rest upon lies and misinformation, what they fear most of all is people who give really an accurate picture and expose their narrative. The narrative is all important at the moment to Western imperialism in their adventures and wars, which is why, of course, they always pretend in this current conflict that everything began on October 7th. There was no conflict before October 7th. Hamas launched the war and they're the terrorists, and this is the Israel-Hamas war, and they want you to forget history. So giving a historical context is something they're frightened about, and I think that's why they fear communists, come for the communists first. Just, actually, not for being communists in and of themselves, but for having clear vision, giving clear information, and it's that information connecting with the mass movement, so that they become aware of, wider problems. Why are we poor in our country when there's so much wealth? All of these problems are very much connected, and I think it's for this reason they're clamping down. So once they'd taken the booklet, they went away, and literally half an hour later they came back and said, we've got further instructions now. Now it is a crime and we have to arrest you. So again, they went from just having a stall to confiscating books to then arresting us for, and in like half an hour interval. So clearly there were politically orchestrated, decisions which had already being made behind the scene. And I felt quite sorry for the police as kind of quite low level, agents, servants. Yes, they're having to follow orders. Yes, they ultimately will have to take responsibility for their actions and think for themselves, but they don't know what they're doing. They're being told this is a crime, go and arrest those people. They're just doing their job. And, the low level policemen who look after you, they're quite decent people. They look after you very nicely. They'll treat you nicely when you're in jail. But they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're being asked to do, and they don't realize the extent to which they're being used to politically police political criticism of Israel, and in that way, very really shutting down freedom of speech and criminalizing what otherwise has been our right, and acting really as an adjunct of the genocide in the working class movement in our country, Chris.
I mean, interesting you say that, actually, because I've had a few conversations myself with police at local demonstrations, because these demonstrations in support of Palestine are not just confined to London and the big cities. I mean, many smaller cities and indeed towns, even villages, are expressing their solidarity and revulsion and horror at what the Zionist entity has been doing in Gaza, and indeed in the West Bank. Let's not forget the pogroms that they are engaged in the terror regime and terror campaigns that they are waging in the occupied West Bank. And it's, they're just obeying orders, these guys. I mean, and they when I've challenged them, they say, well, this is what we've, well, a bit like what you experienced, really, well, this is what we've been told. And I've subsequently, taken it up with various chief constables with not a huge amount of success, but at least it's a shot across the bow. It's also interesting as well what you say, Ranjeet, about them confiscating books, and just the kind of imagery of that, really. And you quoted Goebbels, and of course the Nazis are infamous, of course, the great book burning exercise. And it's this kind of seems to be a sort of parallel there. And another thing which came to mind when you was talking about Goebbels and telling the big lie, as it were, and so on. I'm just reminded of what Julian Assange said. And of course, let's remember, poor Julian still languishing in a high security Belmarsh prison for basically exposing US war crimes. And obviously that's the main reason. But I mean, he was doing a lot more than that, exposing the abuse of corporate and state power. But it's an absolute outrage. But of course, one of the things he said before he was incarcerated is that all wars are started by lies. And if war can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth, he was saying. So your point about truth is absolutely crucial, and truth tellers are targeted. It's quite an astonishing and chilling state of affairs that truth tellers, Julian being the most prominent amongst them, but, you are another truth teller, Ranjeet, who's been targeted, and your comrades in the Communist Party have been targeted for exposing the truth, as it were, and trying to sort of close you down, but also I think to send a message to intimidate and frighten others who might be considering following in your footsteps. I don't think it's working, mine, because the turnouts are sort of increasing all the time in these demonstrations, because people are just not going to wear, I think, a genocide happening on their TV screens before our very eyes. But just in terms of the arrest, Ranjeet, I think you did briefly mention it, but I think you said it was the terrorist legislation that they are using. Just say a little bit about that, will you? I mean, what offences are they claiming that you have committed? Have you been charged, and have they, are you expecting to have to appear in court?
Thanks, Chris. Well, look, thanks for your generous words. I would in no way compare myself to Julian Assange because he's just a far more effective. People have understood his cause, and he's really, really being persecuted. But it is this. But you're right. It is the same phenomenon, actually. And he's not alone. You also, Chris. We must say you're also been a great truth teller. Someone who wanted to call out the lies told. Trying to criminalize yourself, trying to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn from the leadership of the Labour Party, trying to rob this country of what they definitely wanted, which was a government of your administration, a left-wing Labour government, and it was the Labour Party machine in cooperation with the state that cracked down on you and said that is not possible. And that reminded me very much of, look, I'm someone who has thought for a long time the Labour Party is not capable of bringing socialism to Britain, and I totally understand you worked inside the Labour Party and thought it was, and but to me, the experience of seeing the Labour Party machine so overtly collaborate with the state to get rid of its own government, and why, and it showed to me again what I had thought was the case, and perhaps didn't seem like it was to you working from the inside of the Labour Party, which is that really the Labour Party had been suborned as part of the state apparatus. And what the bourgeoisie, what the capitalists are not prepared to do is compromise in any way on their financial interests. Britain, as a kind of old imperial power, has amassed so much wealth. We forget it sometimes, just as working people when we're not wealthy. But in the city of London, there's such a concentration of wealth, the result of hundreds of years of empire and looting, that they still are dependent on export of capital, on the profits they make from investing that all abroad and exploiting workers all over the broad. That's what brings in their bacon, if you like. And Karl Marx very famously said that nowadays atheism itself is a minor sin compared to the criticism of existing property relations. He said the English church would more readily pardon an attack on 38 of its 39th articles than on 1/39th of its income. And I think this is the vindictive heart of the matter, the real establishment, the Tory party, the City of London, the state, and actually I think that the leadership, the right-wing leadership of the Labour Party as well, are all in collaboration in protecting the interests of finance capital. It's that makes them very vindictive against you, against Jeremy Corbyn, against Julian Assange, and in a minor way against me and my comrades as well. But in terms of the terrorist legislation, sorry to come back to your actual question, it was just thinking in response to your words and your thoughts. But in terms of the terrorism legislation, so what they've actually said is this is Section 12 of the Terrorism Act 2000, which is giving support or propaganda to support a proscribed organization. So they list lists of organizations. I guess it's incumbent upon us all to keep up to date with those organizations and to be very careful about our wording in order to carry on our work and avoid being liable to those charges. But myself, of course, they were totally unable to prove this. One, because I was actually released first of all on bail conditions, saying I couldn't give out information at a demonstration. So I, by definition, didn't give out the leaflet that they were concerned about, and they were unable to prove that I did because I hadn't. But secondly, my comrades also gave out a leaflet which in no way makes any reference to Hamas, but it supports the right of the Palestinian people to resist, which is enshrined in international law and UN resolutions. So again, they don't really have a leg to stand on, but clearly they're seeking to. And I know that, for example, Tony Greenstein, who's a member of Brighton PSC, I understand, and I understand again is a man of Jewish origin, has put out some kind of tweet, and I've seen the tweet. I don't know if it's true, but it apparently says, "I support Hamas." Now you can see why someone would say that when everyone is being asked to conflate Palestinian people with one particular organization, which our government has in advance labeled terrorist and made and outlawed, although it is, the democratically elected government of the people of Gaza since 2006. but then if you, and that's part of the Israeli strategy also, to divide the West Bank from the Gaza Strip, to sow discord amongst the PLO so that they could face the disunited opposition. That's been part of their strategy, which is to an extent has worked. But irrespective of all that history, we're being asked to buy into that narrative. So I understand why Tony Greenstein said, well, not me, Tony Greenstein said he supported Hamas. So I understand that, but that makes you liable to prosecution under these laws. So we have to be box clever and not fall not put ourselves in that position. Personally, I didn't put myself in that position, but I was still targeted. So this is political policing. And I think it's aimed to say, oh, I've someone who's become prominent, not really for anything I've done, for the victimization they first put on me, in that first demonstration. That went very, very widely viral on Instagram. I wasn't into Instagram. I considered this an app for sharing photos with a few friends and family of my kids. But actually, I'm aware of it. But there's a very large number of political active people and pro-Palestine supporters in particular. So Loki, Judy Kaller, Palestine on a plate. A Gazan girl. There's lots of Palestinians and Palestinian active press news who are on that platform, and they actually televised my arrest or spread it on social media channel very widely. And it was that led all kinds of people to come to know of it and know of me and actually reach out. So if the intention was to put political policing and send a message to people they shouldn't be involved in this, actually what they've done is it's like they've picked us out of the crowd and they've drawn attention to the very thing that the Zionists were afraid of, which is the knowledge and the truth. And I've got to tell you that we've sold hundreds of those books. That analysis, and we don't sell it at a profit; it's sold at cost price. But the point is that the knowledge is going out to people, and they'll be strengthened by that, whether they join our organization, another organization, no organization. The truth and that historical truth and information can only strengthen their resolve, strengthen our movement, and strengthen our cause. So I'm very pleased about that. I think we do have to be careful of the law, and I think it's something that we're going to be addressing. Obviously, there's change. If the state are going to start putting extreme pressure on activists, then we have to learn to continue our work in that atmosphere of pressure. Personally, I refuse to be bowed. To me, Ho Chi Minh said nothing is more precious than independence and freedom, and he was talking about the right of nations. But as an individual, nothing is more precious than your consciousness, than your free will, than your freedom to speak out, than your knowledge that you're doing the right thing. I think once you cave on those, you lose everything. So I'm an enormous respecter of yourself, of George, of your party and your work in the Workers' Party, Chris, but also of Julian Assange and everyone who really is able to expose the current system of lies and the way it covers up for, and it allows the criminal act of repression and war to go unpunished, but speaking against those criminal acts, it's seeking to criminalize. Yeah,
I mean, we're nearly at an end of the show, Ranjeet. But I mean, it's an absurdity, isn't it, to be invoking terrorist legislation against grassroots activists who are merely distributing information, truthful information. I mean, it brings the whole thing into disrepute, doesn't it?
I think it does. I think it shows the fragility. It's a sign of their weakness, not strength. I think when British imperialism was strong enough that it can allow you to have whatever. Oh, you can be a communist. There can be a million varieties of communism. We're not bothered because no one really believes it. I think that was their strength. They could they had a sense of everyone's doing all right out of the system. I think right now they don't have that sense. So post-COVID with the recession, there's 13.5 million people in our country who are living in poverty. That's a massive and unprecedented reduction in the living standards. On the one hand, an increase in their drive to war, and a decrease in their overall power with the rise of BRICS and the decrease of British imperialism. And now they want to escalate their war against Iraq, against Yemen. And yet there's a mass movement on the street, which is not just a one-off, it's coming time and time again, week after week, which is seeing through their lies and opposing them. I think they're far more worried than we realize sometimes. And our movement has far more ability to stop their plans. And it's becoming more creative. We're not just limiting ourselves at demonstration. Clearly, there are people who are aware that if you challenge the economic and financial interests, the Elbit systems, the military, stop them transporting their weapons, put pressure that actually armies and military don't function, then actually they lose their ability. And by they, I mean, the British imperial billionaire business elite and that class, they lose their ability to carry on their racket. And I think they have genuine fear at this stage of the power of our movement. And we shouldn't forget the strength that we have.
That's very encouraging and uplifting words, Ranjeet. And and it's like it's a really important way of looking at it. The fact that they have been cracking down so hard and so ridiculously, actually, against people like yourself, and indeed other people, just for carrying a Palestinian flag or something like that. It is indeed, I think, an indication of their weakness, because you're absolutely right. When you think back, and this should be a real encouragement, I think, to people to keep going and build still further, because you're absolutely right. Go back sort of 20 years or more ago, they didn't really care. It didn't matter really, because they weren't fearful of us. They didn't think that we could cut through. But we are increasingly cutting through. I will say this as well, Ranjeet. You were ahead of the curve, or certainly as far as you're ahead of me anyway, in terms of recognising the Labour Party is essentially a vehicle of the establishment. It took me 44 years of party membership before I began to realise it. I naively thought that the Labour Party was capable, if only we could get sufficient numbers of members to join, that we could turn it around and we could make it a genuine vehicle, for socialism. And we sort of came close, but unfortunately, I think the leadership blinked. And I think if they'd perhaps been a bit more ruthless or a little bit ruthless. I mean, they were not ruthless at all, actually, in challenging our enemies and calling them out, and particularly the Zionist lobby. I think we could have got a lot further than we did. There was huge support for us. I mean, we became the Labour Party, that is, became the biggest party, as you know, Ranjeet, in Western Europe. And there was a real sense of purpose. I mean, I toured the country pushing for democracy reforms to basically consolidate our position. But unfortunately, Jeremy and Len McCluskey and company, they backed down and ended up voting them down, essentially. Well, Jeremy didn't have a vote, but the Unite delegation voted down those democratic reforms, which would have made MPs accountable to the members, and they were on the ropes. They were struggling. And I know, had we got that through, who knows, the course of history may have been different. And just one other thing, I think, you mentioned Tony Greenstein. I think just a little bit of clarification. I think from memory, I've not actually dug it up, but I think what he said was that he actually opposed Hamas, but when it came to Hamas versus Israel, he supported Hamas in those circumstances. It was words to that effect. It wasn't sort of giving, Hamas a blank check. And of course, he's been targeted on that basis. But Ranjeet, that's been a really fascinating discussion. We could go on for a lot longer. We must get you back, because you're a great raconteur, and you're a great advocate for truth and justice, and a real kind of spirited and brave activist, comrade. You set the standard for others to follow. So where can people follow your work, Ranjeet? I mean, I know you're on social media, but how can they follow you? How can they follow the Communist Party or the CPGB-ML, and anything else? Any other sort of references that you want to let people know about, so that they can look them up?
Oh, that's very kind of you, Chris. Well, the easiest way is if you go to our website, which is simply communists, COMMUNISTS, thecommunists.org. And if you go on that, then actually, I think the best way is it'll ask you to sign up for email updates, and you'll get regular information from the party and about our work. We're having a meeting this Saturday in Saklatwala Hall, which is our hall in West London, actually on the Labour Party, and a book that we've published on the Labour Party and its history, about its early days, its formation, and actually sometimes we forget the litany of crimes that the Labour Party has been involved in. And it's very interesting sometimes to look at the history that we think we know, and put it all together in context. I'll be introducing that book, though again it's not written by me, but that'll be a fantastic meeting. So basically, if you go to the Communists, sign up for we have Twitter and various things. You'll be able to find us, but via the website is the easiest way, Chris. And of course, hopefully, right now the worst thing is my final bail conditions are I am currently not allowed to attend any demonstration in any way, planned, unplanned. But I hope to be able to see you, and our comrades will be out in most major events, and you'll be able to see us, and we hope to work with you and all of your viewers to help build a really strong and vibrant movement for socialist change in Britain, Chris.
Absolutely. Well, look, unity is strength, and we absolutely have to collaborate and work together. Just one final thing, Ranjeet. How can people follow you personally? Because I think you yourself, I mean, you referred to the CPGB.
That's very kind. Well, I've opened up an Instagram account now, which I think is at Rango, I can't even remember the Instagram account. I've got a Twitter account.
In fact, it's up there, look. Right, it's on, you're on Twitter or X
There you go.
as
I'm
at
on-
Rango 1917.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
A very appropriate year. So yeah, nice one. Nice one.
Great.
Listen, thanks again,
Thanks so much,
Ranjeet.
Andrew.
We've really, as I say, really enjoyed that, and I'm sure our viewers have as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching this evening. All being well, we'll be back next week at the same time. So until then, this is Chris Williamson saying bye for now.